All right. I'm pressing got it.
Welcome, LA Progressive friends and family and readers. Today, we're delighted to be interviewing Ms. Debra Archuleta, and she is running for district attorney for the County of Los Angeles. And I'm going to spend the next couple of minutes, first of all, allowing Debra to introduce herself. Give me about 30 seconds of your resume so that the audience will know who you are and a little bit more about you.
Well, first of all, I'm thankful for this opportunity to meet with you. Happy New Year to everyone and your listeners and your viewership. I am Judge Debra Archuleta, and in a nutshell, I spent 28 years in the district attorney's office, starting as a law clerk in 1989, where I used to make coffee and copies for the lawyers, and I worked myself up to the top level of trial DA in the office, serving primarily working with victims of domestic violence, gang homicide, child abuse, sexual assault, etc. For the past 7 years, I've proudly served as a sitting member of the LA Superior Court. I was elected in 2016 to the Superior Court. I've spent time in the criminal courts. I've spent time in small claims, unlawful detainer courts, etc., traffic. But for the last 3.5 years, what has really been eye-opening and momentous for me in my professional career is sitting in the Edelman Children's Court, which is the foster care dependency court for battered, abused, and neglected children and families for the last 3.5 years, where I've primarily worked with families of color, lower income families who are facing a myriad of issues, including homelessness, drug addiction, mental health challenges, domestic violence, drug abuse, etc. So that's me in a 30-second nutshell.
Great. Well, thank you for that introduction. So, when I was someone reached out to me, and I'm not sure if it was you first or if it was actually John Cager,
Yes.
who was your former pastor
Yes.
and was and is my current friend. He was never my pastor, but I certainly,
Missed out because the man could preach the word, which is what kept
yes.
going to ward for all these years.
Yes, I know he can because although he was not my pastor, he and I both belonged to an organization where laity and clergy came together working towards issues of social justice. And
Yes.
so the LA Progressive, my publication, would often seek contributions from him, his wisdom, and I am a Christian. I'm a progressive Christian, and I place a lot of emphasis on that word progressive because in many ways today, when you say you're a Christian, there's an image that pops up in people's mind that doesn't necessarily reflect who I am and the way that I see that Christ has taught me to live. But
Right.
I'm going to leave that there. We're not going to get into any religious discussions. I am interested in knowing why you would want to be interviewed by a progressive magazine and what you have to offer a progressive community, even though we briefly spoke about, well, what does it even mean to be progressive?
Right.
So tell me what you think it means and why it's important for you to be interviewed by a progressive magazine.
Well, thank you. I believe that to be progressive, when it particularly comes to issues of drug addiction, mental illness, and homelessness, we need a new and a more progressive approach. Allowing our fellow brothers and sisters to live on the streets under tents and under tarps on the streets of the County of Los Angeles is inhumane. And I believe that in order to be a more humane and civil society, we need to allow for our brothers and sisters to be able to be forced into some kind of a drug treatment program. We have to have these people in drug treatment so they can turn their lives around. If they have mental health issues, they need to be in mental health treatment and care, because what has happened with the drug addiction crisis here in Los Angeles has led to a tremendous increase in mental health disorders and has led to a number of our fellow citizens living, like I said, under tents and under tarps on the streets of the County of Los Angeles. There's a lot of criminal activity going on in these homeless encampments. And I believe that a new approach, and if you want to call it progressive, is required because we have to get these people into treatment. I've talked to so many drug addicted individuals. I've had them in my own family. Most families have had the experience, if you will, of having family members that are addicted to drugs or alcohol or that have mental health issues, etc. But we need these people into treatment. And I've talked to so many addicts. In fact, I was at the Victory Outreach event in Compton over the weekend where Bootsy Collins' wife was there, and I talked with the chaplain of that church. And he himself told me he was a former gang member. He was a drug addict. And he said, had I not been in custody and forced to, well, he found the Lord, but found the 12-step program and found sobriety, he would have been dead by now. So we need a compassionate/progressive approach to dealing with these individuals that are, many of them are marginalized from our communities. They're incapable of caring for themselves now, and they've lost ties with their families for a variety of reasons. One of the last things I did in my role as a judge in dependency court before I stepped down from the bench and took an unpaid leave of absence to run for this position, I was removing approximately 10 to 15 newborns per week from mothers that had drugs in their system, and then the babies had drugs in their system at the time of birth. These children were born with methamphetamine and fentanyl in their system at the time of their birth. That woman, that mother who's visibly pregnant, about to go into labor, that is so addicted, she needs a treatment program. But I'm sorry, the individual that sold that woman those drugs, there needs to be some custody or consequences imposed for that. You cannot sell drugs to a visibly pregnant woman, and that woman goes into labor in a hospital and gives birth to a newborn that has fentanyl in its system, because this child is being set up for a lifetime of difficulty, incarceration, potentially foster care, learning disabilities, etc. We have to stop that, and we have to stop that now. And frankly, no other candidate in this race can speak to that experience like I can.
Thank you. So I believe that there are criminogenic social conditions, including economic conditions, that have a major contributing impact on drug use and other forms of criminal behavior. And at times, I believe in this country, and I think that the statistics have borne this out. At times in this country, we have overly relied on police and prisons to correct social conditions, and we have consistently failed to correct those social conditions because these are not necessarily good tools. I'm not a mental health professional. So I can't really speak to whether or not the mental health community supports using criminal remedies to deal with drug addiction and those kinds of crimes. But what do you say to the fact that these crime statistics have grown and continue to grow, basically since 1970? And yet our methods for addressing them continues to be the same.
Well, I don't see drug addiction as a crime. I see it as a health condition. However, people that engage in drug selling, for example, a lot of this is done by organized crime. It's gang-related, drug-organized crime that is taking place in these homeless encampments, where these individuals are preying upon our most vulnerable members of our community. So I do not see drug addiction as a crime. I see it as an illness. I don't see mental illness as a crime. I see it as an illness that needs to be treated appropriately. If these individuals had diabetes, they'd go to the doctor, they'd get insulin, they'd get a prescription, they would get some help. We would not allow them to live on the streets like we have grown accustomed to now. The other issue that I see is that we cannot punish our way out of socioeconomic, and we can't punish our way out of socioeconomic conditions. But we can provide opportunities, including a better education for our communities of color, so that everybody has an equal opportunity to get that high school degree and to go on and pursue whatever their dream is, be it a college degree, becoming a plumber, be a car mechanic, whatever it is. The other issue that I see that's very concerning to me, and I've been in the courts for 35 years, many of the individuals that perpetrate these crimes might be people of color, but they're also preying upon their own communities, which include Black and Brown women, children, families, and businesses. And we are not lifting the rest of the community up. It's making it difficult at times for our families, our women, our small businesses, community owners to be able to overcome sort of this criminal behavior because it's happening within our own communities. And we need to be able to address that at the root of the problem to protect our communities of color, our working class communities, etc. That's how I
Thank,
see it. 35 years.
thank you. So I noticed you're wearing a UCLA
I am.
sweatshirt. And UCLA has a program, and I believe it's still up and running. It's called Million Dollar Hoods. I
Yeah.
don't know if you're familiar with the Million Dollar Hoods program. Kelly Lytle Hernandez, Professor Kelly Lytle Hernandez was the director of that program and may still be the director of that program. And that program focuses on the inordinate amount of tension, both from an economic perspective and from a perspective of where the police department and other law enforcement agencies are deployed, both the Los Angeles County Sheriff and the LAPD. So when you talk about people of color, what we find in the Million Dollar Hoods, and this is an exhaustive um, data research project conducted by UCLA. And what they found is that although crime may be increased in certain neighborhoods, there also appears to be a connection between the increase in crime and the number of police interactions with people in those communities. Do you have an opinion of that, of the over policing of certain communities?
This is my opinion. I am a member of the Ward AME Church for 9 years. I've been a member of NAJA, which is the National Association for Equal Justice in America, which is a civil rights group out of Compton. I've been involved with them for probably 10 years. I'm good friends with the president, Royce Esters. And I can tell you this, when I go to events in South LA, or I go to church in Watts, or I go over to, well, Holman United Methodist on South Adams has had me several times. And I talk to members, particularly of the African American community. Everybody I know wants more police because they feel safer when there is more of a police presence. I see disparities in the policing that goes on. For example, I live in an area that is patrolled by the sheriff's department. And then what I hear goes on in Compton, which is also patrolled by the sheriff's department, and the level of criminal activity that goes on there, it's unacceptable. So when people want more police, there's been studies done out of Detroit in the last 5 years or so, pre-George Floyd. People wanted more policing because they felt that the police presence made them feel safer. Are there bad police officers? Absolutely. Are there police officers that should not have a gun and a badge? Absolutely. And I've spoken at length with the major law enforcement agencies here in LA County, and they know me, and they know that I am not going to tolerate bad police procedures, and that those officers, like every other citizen that's engaged in violent and serious crime, are going to be held accountable, including the police officers. And I've spoken very honestly and directly with the sheriff's department as well as LAPD on those issues. So seems to be a split at times in the community, but everywhere I go in the last few months, and I've told them who I am and what I'm doing and why I'm running against the current DA. I have to tell you, I've been warmly, warmly received in a variety of different settings throughout the county of Los Angeles, particularly in South LA. People in the community want a change, which is why I have a lot of support in the African American community, and I'm very proud and grateful for that support.
Thank you for that answer. So the LA Progressive has for a very long time been a supporter of restorative versus punitive justice. So we look at restoration as opposed to retribution, redemption as opposed to retaliation, rehabilitation as opposed to revenge. And one of the reasons that we've done that is that over the years, 16 years since we've been publishing this magazine, what we've seen is a steady increase in the incarcerated population, while at the same time, a decrease in violent crime. So the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office is the largest prosecutorial agency in the United States. So when
Yes.
we talk about LA or the United States having 5% of the world's population, but 25% of its prisoners, we can look to the largest prosecutorial agency in the United States to seek answers for why is it that we have 5% of the population, yet such a much disproportionately large percent of the incarcerated population.
Well, I don't see it exactly the same way that you do. Prop 57 has reduced the state prison population by approximately 65,000 inmates. I do not see an increase in incarceration. In fact, the statistical analysis that I have conducted and what I notice on the streets and what everybody notices is that there is a decrease in prison population, both at the local state county jail level as well as the state level, the state prison level. That was the whole purpose behind Prop 57. I do not believe the statistics, and I know that they're inaccurate, that violent crime is down. Homicides have fallen by less than 2% within post-COVID time period here in the county of Los Angeles. But when we look at the other crimes, including the retail theft, the smash and grabs, those are up about 112%. Those are serious and violent offenses. I do agree that there are certain instances where we need rehabilitation and redemption. I see those people, such as the drug addicted, the low left petty criminal, if you want to call them that, the individual that is stealing bread and milk and baby formula and diapers because they can't feed their family. Those people need a hand up. They don't need to be incarcerated. But when you have groups of young people, particularly young men under the age of 18, that are being sent in to smash and grab and steal $5,000 designer purses, there's no justification for that. They're not doing this to feed their families. Okay,
Thank
so
you.
there's a difference between stealing for need and stealing for want.
So let's move on to cash money bail.
Yes.
Um, your position on cash money bail, I believe, differs from the position that most progressives support. And we know that United States and the Philippines are two of the only countries that currently use cash money bail, certainly cash money bail for profit. There are companies, for-profit companies that benefit from bail. And I'd like your your position on cash money bail and your understanding of the pretrial detention of people who are detained, who have been arrested and held simply because they don't have the cash to go out on bond. I'd like for you to talk to us about that.
Well, it's never been the position of the district attorney's office to ever hold or incarcerate anyone merely because they didn't have money to post bail or go out on bond. For 35 years, I was in court as a district attorney and as a judge. When I was a DA, I would ask for reasonable bail, and when I was a judge, I imposed reasonable bail. Now, bail is a combination of factors. When we have an individual before us in the court, we'll call him the suspect. Okay, we need to look at the previous rap sheet. Was a weapon used during the commission of the crime? Is there a serious and violent offense history, or is this just a first time, a one-off, a wrong place in the wrong time situation? Was the victim particularly vulnerable? There's a variety of factors. Was the person on probation or parole at the time of the latest arrest and offense? There's a variety of factors that go in. When I was a DA and then when I've been a judge, I never knew the financial wherewithal of the individual before me. There were wealthy people that used the public defender. There were poor people that hired very fancy, high-priced private lawyers. I never knew the financial status of the individual before me appearing in court. All I looked at was a risk assessment. Would this person likely return to court if we gave them an opportunity to come back to court the next time. This is an issue of public safety, not only because many times people that are out and don't post bail are committing serial offenses and they're continuing to commit crimes. However, the other issue is that when there's an a warrant placed in the system for when someone fails to appear in court, it puts the family in and around that individual in harm's way. And it also puts law enforcement and the public in harm's way, because when law enforcement has to go and execute those warrants, they never know what's going to happen. And frankly, when you are with a family member who's hiding from the police, that whole family is potentially in harm's way if the police should go and execute that particular warrant. There was just that shooting of that 4-year-old up in Lancaster, that young boy in the back of the car. And from what I read this morning, it was posted on Instagram, that person is already out released on bail. I don't know what the bail situation was, but when you have someone who gets in a road rage incident that has a loaded gun in a car and fires 8 shots and kills a 4-year-old boy, innocent child in the back of a car, I'm sorry, that guy should have been in custody and had some sort of reasonable and appropriate bail set for the circumstances. So the law provides for bail, and I do not believe in a no cash bail system. I believe in an appropriate, measured bail system with every individual being given an opportunity to either have a reasonable bail assessed, or in low-level offenses, no bail, come back on your word, here's a ticket, please return. But by and large, most people do not return, and that's when the trouble begins.
Thank you. Now let's move on. Now, we're supposed to be trying to wrap this up because, as I told you, we want to keep this to about 15 minutes because sadly, that seems to be the extent to which we can hold people's attention. Bryan Stevenson is one of my heroes. He's a civil rights attorney. He's the executive director of the Equal Justice Initiative. And I love what he has said about the death penalty. He first asked, do people deserve to die for the crimes they commit? And he says, in order to answer that question, the threshold question is, do we deserve to kill? He says, we have a system of justice that treats you better if you're rich and guilty than if you're poor and innocent. Wealth, not culpability, shapes outcomes. Given that, and given the fact that more than 190 people have been exonerated from death row over the past, I don't know, dozen or so years, can you talk to us about your position on the death penalty?
Yes. My position is that it is the law of the state of California, and unless and until the legislature changed the laws for the state of California, that is to be the law. As we know, there's been a moratorium here in California on the death penalty. I have no problem with going along with the death penalty moratorium. But if we want to change the law, then the law needs to be addressed through voter initiatives, etc. When I was in the district attorney's office, I participated in those types of hearings. There is a provision in the law for the death penalty. It has to be used in the most egregious, extreme types of cases. I'm well aware that there have been many people exonerated and their lives have been spared and they've been released from custody, which is how the criminal justice system is supposed to work. But unless and until the voters of the state of California want to change the law, as the top law enforcement officer in the county of Los Angeles, and as a currently seated judge, I had to take an oath and I swore to uphold the laws of the state of California and the Constitution of the United States. There are policies and procedures in place for the death penalty in the district attorney's office. It's used in the most egregious cases. It has to be judiciously applied with a whole host of factors that go into the decision. Ultimately, it's the jury that decides whether or not death is the appropriate penalty, if you will, for the individual. It's not the DA's office and it's not a judge's decision. It's the jury of 12 members of the community that make that determination. And then, as you know, there's multiple layers of review all the way up potentially to the U.S. Supreme Court. So it's not the district attorney that decides. They can file for the special circumstance, but ultimately it's the jury of the 12 members of the community that make that determination.
Thank you so much, Judge Debra Archuleta, who is running the Los Angeles County District Attorney. I'm sure we'll be hearing more from you over the coming months. We wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much for your time, and have a wonderful day, and good luck to you getting over your little cold. I hope you're feeling better. Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much.
much. Bye-bye. Thank you for sticking around. If you like the LA Progressive content and the discussions we have here, please consider clicking the subscribe button below and also give us a thumbs up. That helps to grow our audience by feeding the algorithm, which helps to get this content in front of more eyes. Thanks for stopping by. We really appreciate your support.